What if I told you that some of baseball's greatest seasons filled with jaw-dropping stats, record-breaking achievements, and game-changing performances never got the recognition they deserved? That behind the gleaming MVP trophies and polished press conferences lies a hidden ledger, a list of names that should have been called, but weren't. From legends like Ted Williams and Willie Mays to modern stars like Mike Trout and Matt Kemp, history is filled with players who did everything right and still walked away empty-handed. Why? Because MVP voting has never just been about performance. It's about timing, narrative, popularity, and sometimes politics. In this video, we'll uncover the truth behind the most shocking MVP snubs in MLB history, and by the end, you might realize that the most valuable players weren't always the ones holding the trophies. What if greatness wasn't enough? What if dominance on the field, power, speed, precision wasn't what decided baseball's highest honor? What if MVP awards weren't just about performance, but politics, about market size, media favor, and whether you smiled the right way at the right reporter? Because history shows us something uncomfortable. Sometimes the most valuable player doesn't get the MVP. Sometimes the numbers don't tell the story, the narrative does. And for every trophy handed out, there's another player left in the shadows. Their excellence buried beneath bias, misunderstanding, or just bad timing. This is the story of those players, the forgotten MVPs, the ones who should have won but didn't. And when you hear how close some of them came, how hard they worked, how historic their seasons really were, you'll understand why fans still talk about these snubs like fresh wounds. Let's start in 1984 with Ripken Jr., a player who redefined the modern shortstop. That season, Ripken posted an astronomical 10.0 WAR, a number that not only led all of MLB, but also made him arguably the most complete player in baseball that year. He slashed .30 for .37 for .510, belted 27 home runs, and anchored the Orioles infield with 583 assists, 120 double plays, and 297 putouts. But it wasn't just the volume, it was the precision. His total zone runs, a measure of defensive excellence, was 23, third best in all of baseball. For context, a score of 15 is considered Gold Glove level. Ripken didn't just have a great year, he had one of the most dominant all-around seasons by a shortstop in modern baseball history. And yet, he finished 27th in MVP voting. 27th, behind his own teammate Eddie Murray, who had a solid but not superior season by any advanced measure. Murray hit .306, .410, .509 with 29 homers, which is excellent, but Ripken had more hits, nearly identical power, and far superior defense. The MVP that year went to reliever Willie Hernandez, who was stellar for the Tigers, but there's no sugarcoating this. Ripken didn't just get overlooked, he got buried. His quiet professionalism, his lack of flash, and maybe even the fact that he was already a workhorse legend in the making, made voters take him for granted. This wasn't just a snub, it was a warning sign that even the most consistent brilliance can be invisible if it doesn't fit the storyline. If Ripken's snub was a case of being too steady to stand out, then Ted Williams's is the baseball equivalent of a masterpiece being set on fire. Weiss. His 1942 and 1947 MVP losses remain two of the most bewildering outcomes in sports award history. Imagine winning the Triple Crown, leading all of Major League Baseball in batting average, home runs, and RBIs, and still losing the MVP. Now imagine doing it twice. That's not just disrespect, that's legacy vandalism. In 1942, Williams posted a .356 average, 36 homers, and 137 RBIs. He led MLB in WAR 10.5, OPS 1.147, OBP, SLG, total bases, at basically every advanced or traditional stat that existed. He wasn't just the best hitter that year, he was on another planet. And yet the MVP went to Yankees second baseman Joe Gordon, who was solid but finished behind Williams in nearly every category. Why? The Yankees won the AL pennant, and Gordon was deemed the heart of a winning team. But there was a deeper reason one voters never admitted but everyone understood. The media hated Ted Williams. He didn't play the press game. He didn't give them the stories or smiles they wanted. He was prickly, stubborn, and fiercely independent. And the MVP award at the time wasn't decided by analytics or fan votes. It was decided by the Baseball Writers Association of America, and they held grudges. Fast forward to 1947, Williams does it again. Another triple crown. This time, he hits .3 for 3 with 30 to H'ers and 114 RBIs. Again, he leads in WAR 9.5, OPS 1.133, and up again. He's otherworldly, but again, he finishes second. This time, to Joe DiMaggio. DiMaggio had a great year, won another World Series, and was beloved by both the public and the press. But statistically, he was not Ted Williams. What's so painful about these snubs isn't just the injustice, it's that they left a permanent smudge on one of the greatest careers in baseball history. Imagine LeBron James winning the scoring title, assist crown, and MVP metrics, only to lose to someone because they smiled more in interviews. That's what happened to Williams, twice. He wasn't just a great hitter. He was the hitter, the science of hitting, the guy whose swing kids still study. But when it came time to honor him, the writers looked the other way. Baseball didn't just snub Ted Williams, it silenced him in the record books, even while the field told the truth. Now let's talk about one of the most controversial MVP results in modern baseball memory. Not because the winner was bad, but because he was disqualified by history. In 2011, Matt Kemp had a season for the ages. He slashed .3 to 4.399, .586 with 39 home runs, 126 RBIs, and led the National League in runs, total bases, and WAR. He won a Gold Glove in center field. He stole 40 bases. He carried a struggling Dodgers lineup with very little protection in the order. And yet he didn't win MVP. The award went to Ryan Braun. Statistically, Braun had a great season, .33 to average, 33 home runs, 111 RBIs, and led the Brewers to a 96-win season and a playoff berth. But Kemp was clearly more dominant across the board. And what makes this snub sting so badly is what came after that in 2013. Braun was suspended for abuse, specifically for violations committed during his 2011 MVP season. He didn't just deny it, he lied about it, misled the public, and tried to smear the credibility of the testing process. Eventually, he admitted guilt and took a 65-game suspension. By then, it was too late. The BBWA refused to strip Braun of the award or conduct a revote. Kemp, ever classy, said he thought the right thing to do was to give the MVP to the player who earned it cleanly. But the league and the writers stood firm. As a result, Kemp became the footnote in someone else's scandal. What's so tragic is how short Kemp's peak lasted. Injuries derailed what could have been a Hall of Fame arc. That 2011 season, his prime, his masterpiece, became not just his greatest performance, but his greatest loss. Is not just about stats, it's about integrity, and in this case, baseball not only snubbed Kemp, they cemented the legacy of a cheater over a player who gave the game everything he had. The award didn't just go to the wrong guy, it became a monument to what the system refused to correct. If you ever needed proof that being great isn't enough, if you ever wanted to see raw dominance lose to a personality flaw, look no further than Albert Belle's 1995 season. On paper, it's not just MVP worthy, it's historic. Belle became the first and still only player in MLB history to hit 50 home runs and 50 doubles in a single season. Let that sink in. That feat, 50 bombs, 52 baggers, was accomplished in just 143 games. During a strike-shortened season, he led the AL in runs scored, home runs, doubles, slugging percentage, and total bases. His OPS was a ridiculous 1.091, 128 points higher than the man who actually won the MVP. That man, Mo Vaughn, a great player, yes, but not Albert Belle. In 1995, Vaughn had 39 home runs to Belle's 50, a lower slugging percentage, fewer total bases, and far less impact on his team's offense in terms of advanced metrics. Belle's WAR crushed Vaughn's, and yet Belle finished second in MVP voting by just 8 points. Why? Because the people who cast those votes, the media, despised him. Belle was combative. He was aggressive. He didn't play nice with reporters, and in 1995, that mattered more than launch angle or WRC. Writers openly admitted they didn't. Like him, ESPN's Buster Olney wrote, "If you believe Belle lost because he's a jerk, you are absolutely correct." Mo Vaughn himself later admitted his reputation helped him win. It's not just numbers. It's important to have character. This wasn't just about disliking a guy, it was about punishing him for not fitting the mold of what an MVP should look like. Albert Belle was loud, raw, unapologetically intense. At baseball, still steeped in its traditions and quiet professionalism. Didn't know what to do with that dot. Statistically, the gap between Belle and Vaughn wasn't close. Belle dominated, but personality, that tipped the scale. And when voters use a popularity contest to judge performance, they don't just get it wrong, they rewrite the story of the game itself. When you think of the perfect baseball player, raw talent, insane stats, leadership, flair, it's hard not to picture Mike Trout. But in 2015, Trout learned the hard way that MVP awards don't always go to the best player. Sometimes they go to the best team. That year, Trout was entering his prime, already a phenom, already an MVP winner, already the guy who was redefining what a modern center fielder could be. And 2015 was another monster campaign, .299, 400 to .590, 41 home runs, a league-leading .991 OPS, and a staggering 176 OPS plus. He led the American League in WAR with 9.5 and was elite in every measurable way. The man who beat him, Josh Donaldson, and Donaldson had a great year, .297 average, 41 homers, 123 RBIs, and a .939 OPS, but Trout was better across most advanced stats. WAR, OBP, OPS plus, slugging all tilted in his favor. So what happened? Why did Donaldson get 23 first-place votes to Trout's 7? Simple. The Toronto Blue Jays exploded that season. They scored 891 runs, the most in the league. They made the playoffs for the first time since 1993. They were the story, and Donaldson was their face. Meanwhile, the Angels, mediocre, underwhelming. Trout drove in just 90 runs because the guys hitting in front of him couldn't get on base. He slumped in August, and when the team missed the postseason by just one game, it gave voters the excuse they needed. But let's be clear, Donaldson was great. Trout was historic. It's the difference between deserving and transcendent, and Trout, by that point, had already been passed over twice before. In fact, from 2012 to 2016, he finished second in MVP voting 3 times, despite being the best player in baseball for most of that span. The lesson? MVPs don't always measure value, they measure momentum. And if your team is hot and the narrative fits, you can ride that wave to an award. But if you're dragging a broken team uphill all season, even as you break records, you might find yourself left at the altar again. Now let's rewind to one of the most misunderstood MVP votes in baseball history, 1969. Bob Gibson. Dominant, intimidating, a pitcher who redefined the meaning of control, both on the mound and in the clubhouse. The previous year, 1968, he had posted an absurd 1.1 to ERA over 304 innings. He won both the Cy Young and the MVP. He was so overpowering that MLB literally changed the rules, lowering the mound and shrinking the strike zone just to give hitters a chance. So how did he follow that up in 1969? By remaining elite in a suddenly hitter-friendly environment, a 2.18 ERA for shutouts, 269 strikeouts, and a 160 for ERA plus, meaning he was 60% better than the average pitcher. Even after the league shifted the balance against him, he still won 20 games despite receiving some of the worst run support in the league. His WAR, 11.3, yes, 11, That dwarfed everyone else on the ballot, and yet Gibson finished 30th in MVP voting. That's not just a snub, that's disrespect. Why? Because the Cardinals were bad that year. Their offense was dreadful, and they didn't contend. Meanwhile, Willie McCovey won the MVP, 45 home runs, 126 RBIs, and a .320 average for a contending Giants team. Great stats, great player, but nowhere near Gibson in terms of overall value. There was another issue. Voters were bored of Gibson's dominance. They had seen him win MVP the year before. Now his ERA jumped from 1.12 to 2.18, even though the rule changes made that inevitable. Instead of appreciating his ability to remain dominant under harder conditions, voters saw decline, which is laughable because 1969 Gibson would still embarrass most modern rotations. He finished 4th in MVP voting in 1970 with worse stats, but more wins, and that's the clearest proof of the problem. Voters chase wins, not value. They used outdated metrics, and they ignored context. Bob Gibson didn't just lose an MVP. He lost his place in that chapter of history, not because he wasn't great, but because people got used to his greatness. Let's jump to 2007, the season where the players lit up the National League. But only one could be crowned MVP, the winner, Jimmy Rollins, the snub, Matt Holliday. And what makes this case so fascinating is that both had tremendous seasons, but the way voters chose to weigh value versus narrative made all the difference. Matt Holliday didn't just have a good year, he was an offensive juggernaut. He batted .340, led the NL in hits to 116, doubles 50, RBIs 137, and total bases 386. His WAR 6.0. He anchored a Rockies team that made a late-season miracle run to the World Series, and his September was absurd, batting .367 with 12 homers and 30 RBIs down the stretch. He then hit the walk-off in the legendary Game 163 tiebreaker to get Colorado into the playoffs. So how did he not win? Because Jimmy Rollins did something that looked more impressive on paper, especially to traditionalists. Rollins batted .296 with 30 home runs, 41 stolen bases, and played Gold Glove defense at shortstop. He became the only player in MLB history to record 30 doubles, 20 triples, 30 homers, and 30 steals in a single season. He had a strong year for a Phillies team that won the NL East and ended their playoff drought. But here's the problem. Advanced metrics don't lie. Rollins' WAR was 6.1, barely above Holliday. His OPS plus was 119. Holliday's was 151. His weighted runs created plus W or C plus 151 to Rollins' 119. Holliday was clearly a more potent offensive force, and in the postseason, Holliday was the one carrying his team. So why did voters go with Rollins? Position and context. He was a shortstop, a leadoff hitter, and a spark plug for a team in a bigger market. He had swagger, media appeal, and the storyline, but the award is called Most Valuable Player, not Most Energizing Personality. And if you look at pure production, Holliday gave more. This MVP race wasn't a robbery, it was a popularity contest. The guy with flash and a catchphrase won. The guy with numbers and clutch hits went home with second place, and history will always wonder if we rewarded the wrong kind of value. Let's go back to 1955 to a moment that feels like the beginning of a long, frustrating pattern. The player, Mickey Mantle. The result, a textbook case of how even generational talent can be overlooked when charisma, position bias, and locker room politics get involved. In 1955, Mantle put up numbers that even today would drop jaws. .306 batting average, .431 OBP, 611 slugging percentage, 37 home runs, and 113 RBIs. He led the league in walks, triples, OPS 1.0 for 2, and posted a staggering 180 OPS plus. His WAR 9.5, tops in all of Major League Baseball, and yet he didn't just lose the MVP. He didn't receive a single first-place vote. Who won instead? his own teammate, Yogi Berra. Now, let's be clear, Berra was no slouch. He had a great season offensively for a catcher, a position that demands durability and leadership. He posted a .27 to average with 27 home runs and 108 RBIs, and he handled the Yankees pitching staff with surgical precision. But when you stack the numbers side by side, Mantle dwarfed Berra in every advanced metric dot. So why did Berra win? Two reasons. First, positional value catchers were and still are viewed as the generals on the field. And second, Berra was beloved. He was the wisecracking, camera-friendly, quote-generating face of the Yankees dynasty. Mantle, on the other hand, was still becoming the icon we'd remember. He was talented, yes, but he was young, raw, and quieter. Voters didn't just reward performance, they rewarded presence, and this set the tone for much of Mantle's career. He would go on to finish in the top 5 of MVP voting 9 times. He'd win 3, but time and time again, he lost to players who either played more demanding positions or fit a narrative better. The 1955 snub in particular stands out because Mantle wasn't just better, he was objectively more valuable. The stats were clear. The difference in WAR low 9.5 to Berra's 4.5 should have ended the discussion. But in 1955, the game hadn't yet embraced objective measures. Voters were still seduced by vibes, not value. This wasn't just a snub, it was the first in a long line of MVPs that Mantle could have, and maybe should have, claimed. And it reminds us that sometimes being the best player isn't enough. You also have to be the right kind of player. Fast forward to 1974, a year where Mike Schmidt, future Hall of Famer and 3-time MVP, should have won his first MVP, but he didn't. Not even close. That year, Schmidt slugged 36 home runs, drove in 116 RBIs, posted a .82, .395, .5 for 6/line, and led all of Major League Baseball with a 9.8 WAR. He also led the National League in Ops Plus at 156. The man was a wrecking ball, a third baseman, with elite power, elite patience, and elite defense, and yet he finished 6th in MVP voting. The MVP that year went to Steve Garvey, a popular first baseman for the pennant-winning Dodgers. Garvey had a .31 to average, 21 homers, 111 RBIs, and played every game with a perfect smile and TV-ready charm. He received 13 first-place votes. Schmidt, 0. Now let's talk numbers. Garvey's WAR, just for .4, less than half of Schmidt's. He hit 15 fewer home runs, had a lower OBP, lower slugging, fewer walks, and inferior advanced metrics across the board. So why did he win? Because his team won the division. He looked the part, and voters didn't know what to do with Schmidt's strikeouts and lower batting average. This was 1974, long before OPS Plus and WAR were mainstream. Back then, batting average and RBIs were king. Walks were ignored, and defense at third base didn't get the same love that first base popularity did. Schmidt was penalized for playing on an 80-80 to Phillies team that went nowhere, even though he was the only reason they stayed competitive. Meanwhile, Garvey benefited from a stacked Dodgers lineup and was seen as the heart and soul of a contender. This wasn't just a bad vote, it was an education in how much MVP criteria have evolved. Today, Schmidt's numbers would make him a lock. Back then, he was invisible behind batting average and team wins. And the irony? Schmidt would go on to win 3 MVPs in his career. Once the voters finally caught up with the value of walks, power, and glove work at the hot corner. But 1970 should have been the first. It wasn't a lack of greatness, it was a lack of understanding. Now let's talk about a player who didn't just dominate, he obliterated offensive categories. In the year 2000, Todd Helton of the Colorado Rockies had a season so ridiculous. It sounds made up. A .37 to batting average, .463 OBP, .698 slugging. Percentage, 40 to home runs, 147 RBIs, 59 doubles, and 405 total bases. He led all of MLB in batting average, on-base percentage, slugging, OPS, RBIs, doubles, and WAR at 8.9. It was CARTO and ISH dot, and yet he didn't win MVP. He didn't even finish top 3. He finished 5th. Why? One word, Coors. As in Coors Field, the infamous launch pad in Denver where balls fly higher, further, and more frequently than anywhere else due to the altitude. By the year 2000, the baseball world had developed a deep suspicion of anyone who put up monster stats while playing in Colorado. The idea was that anyone could hit there, and because of that, Helton's greatness was viewed with asterisks and caution tape. The MVP went to Jeff Kent of the San Francisco Giants. A good player, very good. In fact, he hit .334 with 33 homers and 125 RBIs, had a 7.2 to WAR, and benefited greatly from hitting behind Barry Bonds. The Giants won 97 games. The Rockies won just 82, and once again, team success and stadium bias overrode individual dominance. But here's the kicker. Helton's road stats were still insane. He hit .353 with a .4 for 1 OBP and .633 slugging percentage away from Coors. These weren't just inflated numbers, they were real. He was a monster no matter where he played. But the narrative, too strong. Voters couldn't see past the thin air. Helton's case opened up a deeper conversation that still lingers today. How do we properly measure players in extreme environments? And how much does context dilute greatness? In Helton's case, the answer was brutally clear. You can lead the league in everything, dominate at home and on the road, and still be told you don't count. This snub wasn't just about one trophy, it was about how Colorado hitters are forced to be superhuman just to be taken seriously. If there's ever been a case of one incredible moment hijacking an entire MVP race, it happened in 1962, and Willie Mays was the victim. That year, Mays put together a season that should have been an MVP lock. .30 for batting average, .38 for OBP, .615 slugging, 49 home runs, 141 RBIs, and a league-best 10.5 WAR. He also led the league in total bases and ops plus at 165. And remember, this wasn't just about hitting. Mays played elite defense in center field and ran the bases like lightning. He was a five-tool player in the most complete sense of the word. But instead of Mays, the MVP went to Maury Wills. Why? Because Wills did something that, at the time, felt magical. He stole 100 for bases, breaking Nye Cobb's modern era record. It was electrifying. Wills batted .299, had 48 RBIs, and his OPS plus was a modest 99. But none of that mattered. His stolen base total dazzled the media and the public alike. He turned every walk and single into a potential triple. The problem, voters got caught up in the novelty. Wills received a first-place votes to Mays' 7 and won the MVP by a mere 7 points. But when you look deeper, the numbers paint a very different picture. Wills' WAR, 6.0 over for wins less than Mays. Mays was nearly twice as valuable in terms of run production and overall impact. Both players made the postseason. Both were instrumental in their team's success, but Mays was simply better, more productive, more consistent, more complete. Still, narrative won the day. The story of Wills breaking a legendary record proved too tempting. This MVP result remains one of the clearest examples of spectacle over substance. One historic achievement, even a brilliant one overshadowed season long, all-around excellence. It also reinforced a dangerous precedent that a singular highlight or record-breaking moment could outweigh a body of work. And for Mays, who already had an MVP under his belt, voters perhaps felt it was okay to spread the wealth. But that's not what the award is supposed to be. Willie Mays didn't need another MVP to validate his greatness, but in 1962, he earned it, and instead, he watched as it was handed to the man who captured imaginations but didn't come close to matching his value. As we close this journey through the graveyard of MVP snubs, it's important to remember that these aren't just stats on a spreadsheet or lost trophies in a forgotten voting booth. These are stories of excellence unrecognized, of reputations overshadowed, and of players whose legacies were forever tilted by the winds of subjective voting and shifting narratives. Every player we've covered: Cal Ripken Jr., Ted Williams, Matt Kemp, Albert Belle, Mike Trout, Bob Gibson, Matt Holliday, Mickey Mantle, Mike Schmidt, Todd Helton, and Willie Mays shared one thing in common: they gave everything to the game, and in return, the game failed to fully honor their greatness. In some cases, like Ted Williams, it was media resentment. In others, like Matt Kemp, it was post-facto scandal cover-up. For Schmidt and Gibson, it was the refusal to reward greatness unless it came with playoff wins. For Helton and Holliday, it was geography and market bias. And for Trout and Ripken, it was the tragedy of being so consistently elite that people simply stopped noticing. That's the uncomfortable truth about MVP awards. They're not always about being the best. They're about being the most noticed, the most liked, the most timely. But if you look closely, if you examine the numbers, the context, the weight of the seasons these players put together, what you'll find are lost MVPs in plain sight. Stories rewritten by hindsight. Greatness that didn't need a plaque to be real. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Greatness is not always recognized in its own time, but it endures. And while trophies tarnish and votes fade, legends, true legends, become louder. With time. So the next time someone says, "He never won MVP," take a second, dig deeper, because sometimes the system misses, sometimes history needs a second look, and sometimes the most valuable player doesn't need a trophy, just a voice to tell the truth.